that live. Perfect.
All
Nice.
right, let's go ahead and get started. We are bringing BrightID to meet the nation today. Philip and Adam are two members of the BrightID project, and BrightID is an attempt to create identity in a decentralized, bottom-up manner. I'm really excited about this project. So, Philip, Adam, welcome to the nation. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
All right, so where does this story start? Adam, I believe you are the founder of BrightID. How did the genesis of BrightID come about?
Yeah, the way it came about is I had some kind of futuristic visions of how I thought the world should be and things that I wanted to work towards. And I realized, okay, if I want to get there, I've got to, these ideas are kind of far in the future. I've got to work my way back towards the present. And I said, okay, if I want to have these ideals of greater democracy, more participation, more equal distribution of goods, there's some things that are stopping that from happening right now. And I just kept working backwards until I got to like the present. Okay, like what is the very next step that we need to do? And it actually seemed to me like to be able to solve a lot of these problems, you need to have a way to have a digital identity that's uniquely yours, controlled by you, and that can verify your uniqueness in any system. So that's what I set out to do with BrightID. And along the way, a lot of other really cool, interesting people came along and kind of hopped on board. So yeah, that's where we've been going for the past almost 3 years now.
So let's start with the why here. And when I try and explain identity towards people in my Loki, my friends and family, I usually go with the metaphor of like I pull out my driver's license and I say like, isn't it weird that your identity expires every few years? Like, why is that the case? Like, identities shouldn't expire. So Adam, when you try and explain why identity is important or what the problem is with decentralized identity, like how do you explain this thing?
Yeah, I mean, isn't it also weird that you have to take your driver's license to ride in an airplane, or that you have to, take it to all these other places that have nothing to do with driving? It's so yeah, it's really strange. So I think one of the problems with identity is that we came up with these systems that, a lot of them have been sort of haven't changed much for hundreds of years, but as soon as we try to port them into the digital realm, the the social structures around them just break down, and trying to replicate that in a digital realm just doesn't work. And we've had, I don't know, maybe 50 or so years to even think about this. I mean, with the internet, even less than that. And so we're just we're so new to this that we haven't really figured it out yet. But it's so important to bring these structures in a way that makes sense into a digital realm, and to, in a way that can connect the whole world.
Yeah, so I'll say, with your license example, so you go to a bar and you want to buy a drink. What you need to prove to them is that you're over 21, right? But really, you give them your name, your address, your height, your eye color, all these things that they didn't need, they didn't ask for. Really, all they need is an attestation from some entity that they trust, the DMV, that you're over 21. You don't even need to know your age, just that you meet the criteria. So what BrightID does is give the smallest possible information, which is you exist once in any given system. So the idea is, when you validate something with your BrightID, all that system knows is I've never seen this person before without any information other than that. So it's like the smallest attestation, and it's only part of what we call self-sovereign identity. So there's a whole bunch of projects working on self-sovereign identity, and that's awesome. And I sort of describe all of those as they're building a digital locker that can store a bunch of attestations. So the DMV says, yeah, you can drive and you're this old. Your college says, yes, you have this major and this GPA. But there's no entity on Earth right now that can provide a clean attestation that you exist once. And BrightID set out to do that. And we hope to fit BrightID into a bunch of SSI digital lockers Freebox, Global ID, lots of others.
Yeah, I remember in my early days of Ethereum, I was learning about the power of Ethereum and what it can do. And one of them was definitely that bartender example where you hand them your ID and then they get your home address. They get your everything about you, your height, your weight, which is weird. And even your birthday isn't necessary to inform them of the information they need to know. And it's important to appreciate this because this is about retaining privacy and retaining self-sovereignty, right? Like controlling that the data that you leak out to the world. Like if you want to patronize this business, you need to tell them one thing and one thing only, that you are above 21 years of age, not that you are 32 and 3 months or that you live around the street, which can become very risky, especially in a world where it seems to be kind of chaotic these days. And so using a decentralized identity that allows you, the user to give up the amount of information about themselves that they control is really important, especially when we get into a world, especially on Ethereum, that is about removing top-down hierarchical systems and creating bottom-up solutions, right? And so BrightID to me is this bottom-up solution to solving the identity issue.
And it can also remove isms. So, BrightID doesn't let them know your race or your religion or your geography, because for a lot of things that should not matter. There's nothing matters. It's a fair game. It's like, okay, so you want to do a fair launch, right? We keep having these fair launches of projects, right? Okay, so they're going to Wales. All right, well, with a BrightID enabled fair launch, you could say everyone can get 100 of these tokens. They can buy them, they can farm them, whatever you want. That's it. That's truly a fair launch.
Yeah, this whole fair launch mechanism is fair in one definition of the use of the word fair, in the sense that no one was particularly able to front run it or get an advantage that anyone else has, except for the natural advantages of the universe, which is capital begets capital, right? And we were just talking about this on the State of the Nation with Kevin Owaki of Gitcoin, where he is super excited about being able to more fairly distribute Gitcoin grants and more fairly allocate funding based off of one person, one vote, rather than $1, one vote, right? So I'm really excited about that. So let's get into the technicals of BrightID. How does it work?
Yeah, so the basics, the very first thing that you start out with is making a cryptographically signed connection between two people. And what they're testing is that they actually made a connection, that both of them willingly did that, and that that if I'm making a connection with Philip, I'm attesting to the fact that I haven't already made a bunch of connections with Philip, that I'm making one connection with Philip. And so with that as the starting point, then you can start to build this graph of the people that you already know, that you have trusted channels with, that you have trusted connections with. You start making connections with them, you branch out from there, and you start to build up this graph. And then that graph can be analyzed, and by looking at pre-known trusted regions, and this is all anonymous, by the way. There's no photographs, names, anything like that attached to the points in the graph. But as the graph is analyzed, you can make determinations about what is the likelihood of any point in the graph of representing a unique individual. In other words, someone that doesn't appear somewhere else in the graph. And you kind of end up with two different buckets. You end up with people that have enough information about them, they have enough connections to the to, I guess, known good portions of the graph. And then you have this bucket of unknown, which is either could be a real person that hasn't reached the verification standard yet, hasn't made enough connections, or it could be Sybil, someone making lots of duplicate accounts. And the idea with BrightID is that a real person has an advantage over Sybils, because they can work harder and make connections with real people and beat the Sybils at that game. Whereas a Sybil trying to connect to honest people that are on the lookout for Sybils and trying to make honest connections are not going to be able to reach that level of verification the same way a unique human would be able to do that. And so, you know, having this, you can have this anonymous graph and yet still know whether points in the graph represent unique humans.
Yeah, I would definitely want to get into a little bit more there. But first, I think it's worthwhile to define what a social graph is. The first time I heard it was from Nick Carter, and it totally confused me. Can you define what a social graph is?
Yeah, I mean, social graphs arise in a lot of different applications. It's simply when you socially interact with someone and there's a record of that interaction, then you can start to you know, connect the dots and say, okay, I followed Philip on Twitter and he followed me. That represents a connection. Or you could have, so that's like a bi-directional connection. You can also have one directional connections, and yeah, there's lots of different potential social graphs that represent different things. And so BrightID is taking these very intentional, yes, I meant to connect to this person. I'm sort of attesting in some way that I believe that this is someone that I recognize as a human being that I haven't seen before, connected to before. And so that type of social graph is the one that we're building up.
And this goes like all the way back into hunter-gatherer type societies, right? Like this is how humanity was constructed. Like we vouched for one another. It's like, yes, I can trust that person, right? And this is how Facebook created their social web. This is how like Twitter created its social webs, like followers upon followers. Hey, little guy. Followers upon followers would just say like, hey, I'm going to vouch for you, right? And soon we crossed Dunbar's number, right? And for those that don't know, Dunbar's number is like roughly 50, which is the maximum number of like humans that each person can like pay attention to. And so with the advent of like social media and technology, we've been able to grow social graphs to be like this massively large networks of interconnected people. But because we didn't have decentralized identity, we have this issue of like bots, right? Like fake accounts, briganding accounts. Briganding, is that how you pronounce it? I hope so. And especially with like U.S. elections right around the corner, like I don't think the time for a decentralized identity solution that is baked off of I can vouch for that person is we need that more now than ever.
And it's the problem's way bigger than most people think it is, right? There was some study that said half of the COVID news on social media was produced by bots. Half, like that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you guys are doing is you guys are making it difficult to be a bot, right? And the clever mechanism here is there's an incentive baked right in, because first off, identity is useful. Therefore, there's going to be some incentive to use decentralized identity. And if you have like a number associated with you as to the likelihood of you being a real person, that's now kind of like your credit score in a way, where like you have this system of rating where people can, or there maybe this algorithm will determine like, you know, this account doesn't really have very many connections, and the connections that they do have also don't have very many connections. And so we're going to de-weight them on the like list of people that we can trust to be a real person. And that incentive is there. So I think we're about to pull out our phones and make a connection just around the corner here. But the reason why, like my friend, like I got a roommate and I can go connect with him, and then he might go get a new phone and be like, hey, can you also connect with this phone too? And I'd be like, well, no, because that's going to lower my trustworthiness score because I want my identity preserved too. Can you guys talk about that incentive?
Yeah, that's a key part of BrightID, and that's actually something that we haven't cracked yet. But that's going to be really important. Is how do you how do you promote these social norms that allow something like BrightID to succeed? It has to go through this growth phase where you'll be connecting to people that maybe aren't the closest people in the world. But you talked about the hunter-gatherer society before. And I think that that's like the steady state. That's kind of what we're aiming for. It's like there are people in the world that know you very well, that, you know, no matter how good technology gets at creating deep fakes and things like that in the future, these people, you know, they've been with you your whole life, and they know that you are who you say you are. And so they can make these connections, and you can start from there. And you know, you have these connections with the most trustworthy people in the world, and and then you can use them also to, in a digital realm, to be a guardian of your identity. And this is something that ties in very readily with BrightID, is this idea of having a social recovery for your identity. If you know, if you lose your identity, something like the social security number, that's very hard to recover from. Systems that are set up to do that are very difficult. But with something like BrightID and a social recovery, it allows you, you know, you simply reconnect with a couple of the people that you've entrusted.
Right, that you pre-designated.
Yeah, that you pre-designated and that you've entrusted to be the guardian of your unique identity, and you immediately get that back. You don't need to go through some weird government hoop or something like that to do that. So this all like ties back together, and you know, that's the steady state that we're going for. And on the way there, we have to you know, take some paths where we're making connections to people that, and relying on people that maybe aren't the closest people to us in the world, but we're going to get to the point where the graph just becomes closer together, more people are in it, and we eventually reach that steady state that takes us, you know, that transforms this digital realm back into that highly trustworthy, you know, these are my people, this is, you know, and that's what your unique identity is based on.
Absolutely. So what I'm assuming you guys are going to ask for from the nation is that everyone download the BrightID app and make some connections, right? And so let's actually do that right now. If one of you guys wants to show me your code so I can scan it, so we can actually show what it looks like to scan and make a connection, right?
So yeah, so here's my app. I'm just gonna click my code, pops up a QR.
I'm gonna scan it.
Once my camera focuses.
And there, look, there you are. Nice.
There I am.
And I'm gonna confirm that. Yes,
And
Philip, I know you. We've talked
before. Once he
before.
confirms, I get it, and I can see, all right, here's David. He's a pretty new user. He's got only one connection. He's only been at BrightID for 2 hours, and I am also connected to that other person. So cool. So I confirm that, and we are now connected. So now Adam should do the same.
All right, let's do this. Scan a code. If you could shift it over just a little bit and a little bit up. There we go. Boom. There we go. There's Adam. Cool. Now my social graph has improved. My credit score has gone up.
Almost.
Oh.
So now what you need to do is, we don't actually care about individual users when scoring BrightID. We do it based on groups, because that provides way more data for the algorithms. So right now I'm going to create the onboarding David group here on the phone, and we're going to join it with David and Adam as the two co-founders, the admins with me. So in just a moment, if you guys go back to the main screen, there's a little bell up in the corner, should get a dot on it, and you should accept that group invite. And you'll see I use an awesome picture.
Boom. Oh, wow. Okay, I accepted it. Oh, I'm in a group now.
Nice. And so, you happen to tell me, and Adam, you should do that too. You happen to tell me before that Kevin Milwaukee was. Oh, doesn't that come up? Maybe I haven't connected to Kevin.
Yeah, since we've connected to Kevin, we could invite him to that group as well.
Oh, nice.
But he's not showing up right now, so we might have to do it later. I might have to reconnect to Kevin.
So this is like pods of people that have some sort of shared identity, some meaning behind them.
Yeah, either a shared identity or they just showed up together. So
yeah, that's the main thing, I think, especially since we're moving to something called group connection, where you can just have one person hold up a QR code, and in a group setting like this, everyone can scan it and automatically be joined to that group. It's just saying that these people work together in the same place. They know each other, and they're all kind of, you know, attesting to that fact all at once. And so then you create this thing that's a group, and that's very useful for the system that's analyzing the graph to say, oh, okay, all these people made connections to each other at the same approximate time. That's a really strong signal for the algorithm to look.
Okay, so now
it's important to say, you know, all of this. So all of this is sort of version 1 of BrightID. You know, it's the centralized thinking version, right? Because a group of people built it. We built this thing to be fully and deeply decentralized in the truest sense of the word. It's all open source and always has been. It's controlled by a DAO. We can get into that later. So right now, our team has come up with 10 different algorithms for how to analyze the graph. But that's not the long-term vision. The long-term vision is anybody can be a node on the network and think up their own analysis, run it on the same data. So all the nodes come to consensus on this is the state of the graph. These cryptographically secure connections really did happen. I don't know if they're unique or not, but they happened. That's provable. But then, so imagine all 3 of us are running nodes. We can all run slightly different algorithms, come up with different answers. So in the long run, your BrightID verification is not a binary thing. That's like the opinion of an algorithm. And we imagine that the cream will rise to the top.
Right. And
it'll be a cat and mouse game. So people are always going to, when it gets really valuable to have a verified account, especially for a bot, okay, well, then there'll be lots of incentives to try to do that. The algorithms will keep getting better, and applications can choose who do they want to listen to in regards to the analysis of the graph. And they can listen to me, or you, or Adam, or a composite of all of them, or run their own.
Yep. Yeah, and if Philip makes his algorithm open source, then I can run it too, and I can check his answers to make sure that he's being honest. And
if David writes an amazing algorithm and puts it in a black box, but it's actually better, he could theoretically charge money for the answer. I don't think that that's the solution that wins out, but we certainly wouldn't stop it.
Right. And so, okay, this can become customizable and like use case specific, perhaps even, right? Like maybe there's this one general score, but maybe somebody tries to make an algorithm for one more specific use case that's a little bit more niche, but more relevant to some odd ends. Or have you guys thought about this?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the big things is there are some applications where having loads of Sybils would be a problem, but having a few doesn't matter. So like, let's say, you want to create a Gmail account. Google doesn't really care if you have 2 or 3. It's not a big deal. They don't want you to have 1 million. That's a problem. So they could have a low threshold because they don't mind if some Sybils get in, but they really don't want to exclude anybody. But then you could have, voting for the presidential election where they really want it to make sure it's won, and they could have hard rails on that. Or you could have, we started talking about like quadratic farming. It's all the rage. So an organization can say, we don't care if we exclude people. There can be a really high bar. You need to go out and connect to 30 people before we let you do this quadratic farming because it's so lucrative to get your one little 1 acre plot to farm. So everyone can have different standards for how hard it is to get in.
Well, I look forward to the first day that I can farm with my BrightID ID. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a race for the first farm to come and implement that.
And think of how much better it is that right now, if you don't have $100,000 in crypto, like you get wrecked by the gas costs because other people are just out farming you and what the profits. But I can't wait to see people be like, no, everybody gets 1 acre. Like you can put in $1,000. That's it, or whatever it is.
Right.
One Wi-Fi, whatever.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Oh, if it's one Wi-Fi, only 30,000 people will be able to participate at most.
Well, right, but even like in Wi-Fi, which has like the best distribution of like anything we've seen, there's still whales in Wi-Fi.
Right. Yep. No, that's true. It's true.
You can. And then there's a bunch of people that have 0.1, and you'd love to be able to get them involved in things.
And I think what makes me so optimistic about this is that, creating your social graph, which is a valuable thing to do, doesn't cost capital. Like this is not a capital intensive exercise. It's like yield farming is capital intensive. It's to be honest, it's kind of by the rich for the rich, right? Like the rich people get advantages during yield farming, and creating your social graph is the opposite of that. It's like one human, right? Like and all humans are largely on the same setting, so long as you have a strong social graph, right? And so you can increase the value of your social graph without having to cost any money or do all that much labor.
Yeah, and we also we haven't sort of come up with the right incentive models yet, and maybe someone else will just build it on top. But like, you can have a game where, okay, you get paid for building out the social graph. You get paid, somebody makes an identity game, and every time you make a connection that ends up validated, you get a token, and that's the only way the tokens come into existence. And we'd even sort of prefer that to be built on top, because we are Bankless fans. We very much believe in the protocol sync thesis, and we want BrightID to be way down at the bottom.
Right.
It's just a tool. Anyone can go grab it. If your application would benefit from not being full of bots and having fairness built in, just go grab the BrightID thing. And with the Gitcoin integration happening right now, kind of everyone at the core of Ethereum is going to have a reason to get BrightID, and there is some work and hurdles involved in getting it the first time, getting verified. Once you have it, using it with a different application is scanning a QR code. It literally takes 3 seconds.
I kind of think the incentive model is kind of just baked into the existence, right? So like Gitcoin has it, and then Gitcoin finds it valuable, and then maybe some yield farm finds it valuable. And so like all of a sudden, like if you have BrightID, you are able to access more things, and it kind of just bootstraps itself into existence. Are you guys thinking about this too?
We hope so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. The idea is you get your BrightID, and you just, it opens the door to a bunch of different things. And the more applications that start using it, then the easier it is for the next application down the road to use it, because they'll already find out, oh, look, 20% of my users already have BrightID. Okay, this isn't as big as a hurdle as I thought it was going to be.
Maybe we give some quick shout outs to the early projects that have integrated BrightID.
Yeah,
just getting started, but there's some really cool stuff. So one that you just talked to Kevin, so Gitcoin is doing it. So I hope all of you listening to this give to Gitcoin, because it's an amazing community to be part of, and doing so much of the ecosystem. All the projects you give to will get 25% more matching funds if you're BrightID verified. And to clarify, you just need to be BrightID verified by the end of the round. So you can give now and get verified a week or two later. We've got loads of meetings set up where you can come and meet other people and do that process. Another is the OneHive project. So really cool. Building new ecosystems and incentive systems, and their native asset is called Honey. And there's the Honey faucet. And if you're verified, you can go get your share of honey every day. So every 2 days, and it's like $40 worth of honey right now.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, y'all should go to the Honey faucet and get that. So we run in order to run our own operations, we couldn't do it on ETH main chain, obviously, for lots of reasons. We created something called IDChain, which is a L2 sidechain EVM compatible thing. It's a lot like XGuy. But one of the things that's really cool about IDChain is that gas is provided like UBI. So regular users get a lifetime supply of free gas token. It's called ED. And you can get that for free just by having BrightID. In the long run, an average user, that'll be all they need. If you're a low usage user, you could sell your excess to power users that need it. It's not meant to be a lot. It's never meant to be a lot of money. It's a spam protection thing for the network. But just imagine gas is free if you're just a regular person.
Yeah, so just to be clear about that, our nodes use that for consensus. Before that, we were using Rinkeby, just like we would have been happy to use mainnet, but the costs for just simply writing some extra data into transactions was going to be too much. So we wanted it to be on an actual mainnet, and IDChain seemed like a cool way to do it. But it's BrightID is blockchain agnostic. It doesn't even like to use it doesn't even need a blockchain. It's just the nodes need a way to figure out to come to consensus about, okay, these set of connections happened in this time frame, that sort of thing, and decide on, so that they can have identical copies of the graph to work on, so that if I want to verify that Philip's algorithm is doing what he says it is, I can have the same copy of the graph and run his algorithm on it and check his answers. So we need that consensus is important. So we need a way to do that. IDChain is our current solution for that.
Okay, so just to reiterate, like the reason why it's on a blockchain is because it's very important that there's just one copy of the truth of the grand social graph, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
yep.
So making sure that like my phone has BrightID on it, but it has consensus with everyone else because of blockchain technology.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, but then as far as like actually using BrightID, integrating with an app, the app doesn't need to use blockchain at all to integrate with BrightID.
So you can, Ethereum apps can totally use it, but Web 2 apps can use BrightID.
Right.
Early on, we used to imagine like what people in the regular world would do this. Okay, so there's a new coffee shop. They want to get customers in. They're willing to give one free cup of coffee to anyone that walks in the door.
Right.
But only once, because like that.
Right.
Most coffee shops would be thrilled to get a customer for the price of a cup of coffee, but they don't want someone to come in and abuse the system.
Right.
Like a random coffee shop could theoretically use BrightID.
Right.
To get one cup of coffee.
Yeah, it's not even a web model. This is just a model of identity. That's fantastic. I mean, they could have like taken a copy of your like driver's license, but that would have been way more cumbersome than like a QR code on your phone that you already have. And again, we go back to the privacy issues that we talked about earlier. That is just absolutely fantastic. So where does my Ethereum address come into play, or does it even at all?
So it could come into play. Just to give some examples of apps that are currently using Ethereum addresses as identifiers, there's one called Burn Signal, which allows you to burn ether to state your opinion, uses quadratic voting. It's pretty cool. Experiment in democracy. So if you go to ethereum.brightid.org, you can link your Ethereum address to your BrightID for the purposes of using Burn Signal. Now, one of the things that we want to be careful with is we want to stay away from having like a single identifier that is just links you to everything. That's a total failure of privacy. So we definitely don't want to default to that. So what we do is we allow apps to say, okay, what identifier do you want? And so you could tell your users, you could say, hey, if you want to use Burn Signal, create a fresh Ethereum address, or we're going to create a new unique identifier, or accept the new unique identifier that you create. We're going to link that, and so that doesn't exist anywhere else, doesn't tie you to anything else. And so we have this concept of contexts, or like compartments of, you're unique in this system, you're also unique in this system. You don't have to link those two systems to know that you're unique in both. BrightID verifies you in both of those without that unwanted linkage. That's really key to maintaining that privacy.
Fantastic, guys. I'm so excited about the future of this. So if you got, what do you guys want listeners of the Bankless YouTube and members of the Bankless Nation, what should they do to help BrightID grow?
Oh yeah, I love that. As we talked about Gitcoin, we're doing the biggest Gitcoin fundraising campaign that we've done yet for BrightID, just to get us to an even better state where we're more portable. We can integrate better with more applications. In the future, it's like Philip said, BrightID should sync to the bottom. You shouldn't have to have a BrightID app It should
Yeah,
just be
the
kind
app
of baked into everything you use.
The app is not BrightID.
Yeah.
Like right now, like we call it internally we call it the mobile reference app. We're just sort of showing how a system could use BrightID, but in the long run, we hope it's built into a bunch of different wallets and whatnot. Like,
Yeah.
It's just a front end.
So our target is like we get enough people donating through Gitcoin grants and some of our other campaigns, and then we're able to have this this SDK that allows anyone to use BrightID in a portable way, integrate it deeply with their own systems, and it just becomes kind of this. Really, my vision for BrightID is that in the future, everyone's going to have an identity wallet. BrightID is going to be like this sticker that shows up in your identity wallet, and it might show up multiple times saying, yes, I'm unique on Burn Signal. I'm unique in Honey Faucet. I'm unique in ED Faucet.
Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm unique in Facebook. So these little stamps that that show that you're unique in every system that you use. That's how I want BrightID to kind of like manifest itself.
All right, guys. So you guys all, I'm assuming listeners listened to the State of the Nation this morning with Kevin Owocki. Use Gitcoin to fund a bunch of development, and then use BrightID and your new social graph to amplify the funds that you donate, right? So BrightID is amplifying all funds by 25% if you get verified by the end of the Gitcoin period. So that is how we bootstrap this decentralized identity from the ground up. And like Ryan said in his tweet that I just absolutely loved, first we take back our money, and then we take back our identity. And it sounds like to me that BrightID is going to be the way that we do that. So Philip, Adam, thank you for coming on to the Meet the Nation, and thank you for meeting the nation.
So awesome. Thanks so much, Dan.